Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Mindful Breastfeeding interview today with our midwife, Margaret McGuigan. Is that how I pronounce it, Margaret? So Margaret's going to talk to us a little bit about her research into laid-back breastfeeding and laid-back positions, why it's becoming a lot more popular and why it's so good for mums and babies to get breastfeeding started. Thank you for joining me today, Margaret. So tell me a little bit about yourself and your interest in this particular part of midwifery.
Well, I am a mother of five, grandmother of two now. They're quite big lads. And I've been a Leche League leader in Ireland for the past 27 years. So I've been helping mothers and babies breastfeed for quite a long time. And since about 2010, the Leche League has been promoting laid-back breastfeeding, and we all just see for ourselves how well it works. You can have a mother who might be struggling for quite some time using upright positions, and I would never say you should do it this way. You know, I would just make the suggestion, and I'd say, humor me for a minute. Do you want to try? And I go through all the details about bringing her bum forward and lying back and getting baby into a laid, on top of her torso into a laid back position. And 9 times out of 10, it's like a dream. It works so well. Sometimes mothers have cried with relief that the pain is gone. It seems to be such a wonderful tool. And yet then the mothers are often they have 2 kinds of emotions. They're delighted that now they found something that works and they're not in as much pain, and maybe baby hasn't latched on very well before, so now baby's latching and feeding, but that fades, and then all of a sudden there's anger and frustration. I've been struggling for this long. Why wasn't I shown this in hospital? Why didn't anybody suggest this to me before? It's such a simple solution. And there's that sort of disconnect between, here we have something straightforward, now well researched, and we have the evidence to back up that this works so well. And yet what I would hear as a leader in the community, as a Leche League leader, was that this wasn't happening. And then I became a midwife, and I was very interested to see for myself, was this something that was being taught? And you definitely have some midwives that will use it and will suggest it, especially if they're lactation consultants or if they've had personal experience of doing it themselves. But I had to say, overall, it's not something we would have seen. So when myself and my lecturer, Dr. Patricia Larkin, we were thinking of a research topic, this just seemed so simple. And I said, why don't we see, as far as we could tell, nobody had studied this before in Ireland. What do midwives actually know about it? Are they aware of it at all? And do they use it in their practice? So that's what we set out to do. Yeah.
I have to say, I have such fond memories of my own Leche League groups around in Bettystown when I had Cooper. It was absolutely fabulous support. And again, like seeing like mums come into the group and really just struggling with, which arm goes where, and you're tired and trying to, we've just overcomplicated it so much. And a simple adjustment, and it's like a light bulb moment of like, okay, this is so simple. And again, and women just feeling like let down because it's like, why I wasn't taught this in my class, and I really showed me on the day. And as well, and dealing with like pain, or if they even got to that point where they're going to a meeting, like there's so many women that won't even get to that point. They were like the pain and the uncertainty of, because I'm in so much pain, I don't know how much baby is getting because I'm dreading baby latching on. That they have a good reason to be annoyed. We're not teaching evidence-based breastfeeding. We're making it more complicated, and we're not even addressing the fact that, your brain is reacting differently after you've had a baby as well. And I remember reading a paper about looking at instruction that's given kind of right after birth, and then trying to remember that instruction the next day. If you can find it in your head, yourself, you can't even remember your name the day after, you're trying to remember all of these steps and what you were taught, which then, of course, is when you're in that, and when the anxiety starts to build, then you're, reducing the oxytocin, and it's like we've just made it Too difficult.
Too
When it
difficult.
should be simple.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Keep it simple. And like we have that research as well now to show the brain plasticity changes when you give birth and throughout pregnancy. And there's good reasons for it to just be able to focus on your baby. And trying to remember a huge amount of instructions and facts is not the way to approach anything at that stage in your life. So laid back breastfeeding is very simple. You don't have to remember a whole lot of instructions. I presented my research at a few different places at the Leche League conference back in March, and then I'll be presenting it at the ALCI conference Saturday week. So the Association of Lactation Consultants of Ireland. In it, I sort of tweaked it and refined it over the time since we finished doing the research. And I have all that in there, and I have a bit of background as to what is the history in Ireland of teaching breastfeeding to mothers and what came before. And exactly that, it was bounty books. If you can remember back that far, we used to have these very commercialized bounty books, but I have a copy of it in there, and it's, it doesn't phrase it like this, but I have them all listed. 18 simple steps on how to latch your baby to the breast. Very detailed. Put your finger here, move your arm here, do this, do that, put the legs here. There's a bit in it that even says, now imagine there's a piece of Velcro on the bottom of your breast, and there's a piece of Velcro 2.5 centimeters on the bottom of baby's lip. Now attach these, but it's so complicated, and that just doesn't work. So so
for someone who's watching now and has never heard of laid back breastfeeding, and they might be thinking, oh, how is this different to just like lying flat and putting your baby on you? Can you tell me a little bit about like the mother's position and how the baby is lying?
Would it help? I have a doll here. Would you be able to see it? Maybe I could turn on some lights. Hold on. Yeah. Turn on that big light, please. It's getting darker. I go to the window so I'll have better light, but then it gets darker. Let me see if this will work.
Yeah, great.
I don't know. Is that too bright?
That's fine now. Yeah.
Go. Yeah, that's fine. Good.
Thanks to the lighting and production team.
I know. So we've been teaching mothers to, can you see me here? Let's see. To feed in upright positions. So you've got, mostly mothers are used to this, which is the cradle hold, holding your arm around the baby here. The cross cradle hold is another one where you'd hold your breast with that same hand on that side and hold the back of the baby here. That's actually a really awkward one, and there is evidence from Australia to show mothers who were taught to use this position have 4 times as much nipple trauma. So I've never liked that one myself. I feel it's really exposed. It's not something you can do discreetly on a bus. It's not something mothers are likely to do if they're in a GP surgery at the 2-week check. And the baby gets very heavy. There's rugby hold as well, another upright position. And the research I did showed that when we asked midwives and student midwives what positions they were likely to use, although there's variations depending on the situation, what's their kind of go-to position with mothers, 80% said one of these 3. So what that does is, I think the simplest way to do it is imagine this from baby's point of view. I think it really makes sense to try that. And gravity is pulling baby down in all of these positions. So whether you're this way, imagine your baby, you've got to try and pull your neck, your back, your shoulders up to keep at the breast. Now we have all sorts of little gadgets we use. We give mothers footstools, we give them pillows, banana-shaped cushions, loads of things. But we were never meant to have any of those things. It was meant to be simple and just mother and baby, and breastfeeding would work. So laid back breastfeeding is basically, you can do it on a sofa, you can do it on an armchair, you can do it in an upright kitchen chair. I have in my presentation, I have all those, and I have my daughter-in-law sitting in a cafe in London, and she's in a normal chair in a cafe. So what you need to do is basically, instead of your arms holding the baby's body, your torso holds the baby's body, and gravity holds the baby in. So you bring your bum to the edge of whatever surface you're on, you relax back. It doesn't have to be really reclined. It can be as much as, if 90 degrees is bolt upright, 65 would be enough. But all you need to do is relaxed enough, maybe you could put a cushion or a rolled up jumper or something behind your lower back, that if you're feeding baby at the breast and baby's in a laid back, or you're in a laid back position, if you could take your hands off and baby won't go anywhere, because your arms, now I have a bit of my arm here, but I could lie back even more and I wouldn't need that, at all, and baby could feed. So that's how you know, as Nancy Moore-Backer says, that's how you know you're doing it right, when you take your hands away and baby doesn't go anywhere. So that means gravity keeps baby to you. They get a really deep latch because they're not struggling with their heads to pull themselves up and hold on. It's so much less likely to be sore. We have this study from Italy. It was a randomized controlled trial in 2020 from Malenko et al. And she showed that it reduced nipple trauma, nipple soreness by up to 50% or more. It almost eliminated mastitis, and babies were able to get a deeper latch. There was another one in China then the following year, and it was a meta-analysis, and they had very similar results. So overwhelmingly, it seems to be so much more successful. And there's another one I like to throw in because I think people don't often think about it until you say it. Babies even gain, well, they lose less weight. So they gain more weight overall. And the reason for this is, when you think about it, it makes sense. A mother's less sore. She's less likely to cut the feed short. Baby's getting a deeper latch. There's better milk transfer. And so there's more milk going in and the weight gain is better. So,
yeah, it's brilliant.
huge advantage.
And I think one really big advantage as well for, because you see, when you look at, social media, and the positions that you see are, the bolt upright, and the hunched shoulders, and people could, put your shoulders back, lean back, like bring the baby to the breast or build the table. That was one of the things that I was taught here. Build the table. So you've got all these cushions here, like, and it's, but if you've just given birth vaginally, or you've had a cesarean, your nether regions are going to be really painful, and the incision site. So to be able to, again, to lie back, and you're not sitting upright on looking for cushions because your bum is so sore, and especially, those, you're trying to, that feeding frequency, you're trying to, because the panic to get the baby's weight back for, day 14, that it's just, I think when you look at comfort, we've never really looked at, okay, so, and this, a mother will sacrifice her own comfort to get that perfect latch. Because I even remember on my first, it was a long time ago, getting that, upright, getting them latched on. And then, like, I'm sitting like this because I don't want to move, because and the slightest, or else you got the boppy and he's slipping in the boppy, and then it's all, the latch is gone pear-shaped. And but I think for comfort, I was thinking, if you could, because I call it the Netflix position, it's like the position you're lying back and you've got the remote in your hand and you can be on the couch. And I think for the first few days, especially postpartum, because sometimes mums will say to me, so I'm never going to do those upright positions. And, I'm like, no, they're fine. But let's just, for the first 2 weeks, let's just focus on this, get baby back to birth weight, get you nicely recovered without getting up and down constantly. You've got baby there, so you don't have to, again, be in your head trying to remember the cues. What am I looking for? And so baby is, as I say, right next to the buffet. So because they can feed even when they're in a nice drowsy state, so you don't have to be looking at them going, they're going to wake up to feed. And it just, just really, it makes so much sense. So if it's so easy and so straightforward, and we have this growing body of research now, why do you think there's so much resistance to it becoming mainstream, and this being kind of the default that we're teaching parents?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you what my research showed. So we did research in the summer of 2021, and we surveyed midwives and student midwives on, were they aware of the position at all? Now, some weren't. Majority were, about 80% were. Anyone that was a lactation consultant or that was working towards that role, 100% of them were, so that was great. But lactation consultants are not there 24/7. They're usually not there at the weekends or the nights. So it should be something that all midwives are aware of and they can offer anytime. It should be the first position offered, and if it doesn't work out, then we'll go for something different. But so often it works so well, and baby skin to skin, and they've got this. I forgot to say as well, not only do they have the positional stability, but mothers will often see babies when they're in these upright positions and they'll try to latch the baby on. They've got all these motions going on. So the hands are swinging around, going, the head's bobbing, and the feet, they'll often say to the person beside them, oh, look at he's reaching for you or he's kicking for you. Well, actually, this was all studied in 2008 by Suzanne Colson, and she discovered 20 what she called primitive neonatal reflexes. And we would commonly know that you have suck, swallow, and rooting. And people would think, okay, those are the reflexes that aid breastfeeding. But all of these other ones actually come into play too. So what happens is, this is actually baby looking for leverage. They're looking for grounding with their feet. The feet are very important when it comes to latching on. And they're actually just kicking in midair, looking for something to get them secure. And if you're doing laid back breastfeeding, baby can be up like this, but quite often they're a little bit more down and relaxed across your body this way. And then the feet kick into the top of your thighs and they just pull themselves up. They get in the right position. The hands actually sort of knead and massage the breast. All these different reflexes come into play. And then that works so well. But I'm going back now. What was the question yesterday? Why is the resistance?
Why there's so much resistance? Yeah.
So we asked them, it was interesting. We had 15 multiple choice questions about why they use different positions and how much knowledge they had about different things. But the last bit, there was one that was an open-ended question, and it was, what, if any, barriers do you perceive as laid back breastfeeding being used to establish breastfeeding in hospitals? And it was really interesting to see the results. They actually, we were able to group them into 7 themes, and a lot of it was lack. So lack of something. Right. Now, you could guess at some of them. So a big one was lack of education and training. And that was really the key takeaway from the whole thing. It's all well and good saying to, like, it was great that more than 80% of them had known what they'd heard about laid back breastfeeding. But it's like saying, you know, CPR is a really good thing. If you need to use it, you should do it. And then giving them no training on how to use it at all. So they hear this word being bandied about, oh, laid back breastfeeding. They seem to have about 76, I think, percent picked. We had true statements. They were all true, but they just picked which ones they felt were true. And the biggest one was baby head bobs and can self-attach. So they kind of were aware of that. But when you go on down to where it can be used, how it can be used, what they really said was they lack confidence in suggesting the position to mothers. And they also, a big thing in the open-ended response was they felt the mothers themselves were reasons they wouldn't offer the position. So they said the mothers were too hesitant, the mothers were too anxious, the mothers lacked confidence, they hadn't heard of this before, it wasn't popular, it wasn't seen in the media, all that kind of stuff. And then when we thought about that, really thought it through, what new mother isn't anxious and lacking in confidence and not sure of what she's doing? But here's this position that works so well, and you've got to explain how it works so well. But if you don't know anything about it, how are you going to do that? How are you going to answer her questions and say, well, actually, gravity's going to hold this baby in, baby's going to get a deeper latch, all the things I said before, if you've never heard about it, if you haven't had even 1 hour of a conference session would do it. You know, it's not a huge amount of training that's needed. Exactly. It's just the basics of why this works. But that's what they said. Lack of training was a big one. Lack of confidence, lack of time and staffing, which anyone who works in the hospital isn't surprised to hear that. But they felt it took a lot longer than what they call the traditional positions. So I have a slide I use, and it's actually, if you give me a second, I'll show it to you because I have the book right here. So I used to wonder myself as a mother, how did midwives, why do they teach Do I have the book? I do. Why did they teach breastfeeding? Why did they grab a baby's head and grab a mother's breast and shove them together? Like, who ever come up with that as a good thing? And nobody could ever give me an answer. Like, why is this being taught down, through the education?
Yeah.
And it just seems to be done because it's always been done. So that's basically it. So there was no focus on breastfeeding for quite a long time. Like, we nearly lost breastfeeding altogether. If you go back and look at statistics in the 70s, in the States, about 25% of mothers initiated breastfeeding. And if you look in Ireland, some Irish hospitals only and they didn't do initiation versus discharge, or how, it was just any breastfeeding at all. So we don't really know. But in the 70s, some Irish hospitals recorded any breastfeeding as 10%. So it was really nearly gone. So then you fast forward on to the 80s, a little bit longer, and you have more of a focus on, okay, this is actually something that's important. We need to figure out how to help mothers. So the Royal College of Midwives was actually the first. So if you can see that book there.
Successful breastfeeding. Yep.
Yeah. No, it's a little book, but that's for midwives to teach them how to teach mothers how to breastfeed. And which is, I have a picture here somewhere, but what it actually says is, don't allow the mothers to lean back, as this will flatten the breast, making attachment much more difficult. Encourage her to lean forward, as if probably without even realizing it, they were thinking of, well, you hold a bottle into a baby's mouth, so you've got to hold the breast in there. But like, if you look at all the pictures, I wonder if you can see. Let's see. They're very. It's hands-on.
Yeah, hands-on. Yeah.
I'm gonna latch this baby on for you, and you still see that sometimes today.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's what midwives were saying in the research back to us, when there was no time. It was quicker just to latch the baby on.
Yeah, because you can check that box then and say baby is latched and fed, and yeah.
And it does possibly take a little bit longer, if baby's there and they're getting comfortable and they're starting to do all those rooting things and they're moving and that, but they are under time pressure in a labor ward, and that's why things are moved along. There were a number of respondents that came back and said, they were very candid, and they just said, this is kind of what we've always done. We're very comfortable doing it traditionally, culturally, the way we've always done it like this. And it seems very strange to sort of be hands off and not be in there helping. So that's, I suppose, something else that even an hour or two of education on laid back breastfeeding would help, teach them.
It's almost an unlearning of
exactly
what, the old way of doing things. And I think it's one thing, I think, when you're in labor ward and you have, you've kind of getting everyone ready to move to postnatal. But I think, the midwives that I've talked to, and they were like, oh yeah, it's actually, because yourself, if you're, hands-on, you're helping someone in postnatal and with breastfeeding, and the amount of time that, again, because birth has become so medicalized, if you're looking after, a group of women, and you've got, 3 of those women have had cesareans, that your focus, unfortunately, is your care is prioritized. And because I remember with sitting, as a student, you have a little bit of flexibility. You can go and sometimes sit with the women and help them and support them. But it's like, I remember sitting in handover and looking around when the handover was happening, and someone said, oh yeah, whatever, room you're taking, and they're breastfeeding. And the almost panic of, how am I going to manage everything I have on my plate today and help this? So it wasn't like the midwives didn't want to help. It was just that the lack of staffing and resources, of course, in postnatal as well, the Cinderella of maternity services, they knew that. And you're leaving your shift, disappointed in yourself that you couldn't support these women in the way that they could be supported if we had, the time and resources and an extra couple of pairs of hands. But I think the laid back, especially for postnatal ward, once you've shown the moms how to do it and they're comfortable with it, then it really does free you up then. And so it actually helps the workload
Yeah.
because you're not, and you might remember, sitting in, on a ward with a curtain pulled around you and the heat in the postnatal and you're sweating bricks, helping, trying to, do the upright latch. And it's, it just makes so much sense to, unlearn all of what was kind of knew before and really start focusing on comfort for mum, which will transfer into comfort for baby and longer feeds and not panicking about babies waking to feed.
And for midwife, like the true statements that I had for them to pick out, the second, I'm looking at it here now, the second one that they selected, so 75% said that it reduced back, neck, and shoulder pain for the midwife.
Yeah. Yes.
From bending over to assist by using a hands-off approach. You didn't have all of that leaning over constantly. You could have a 6-bedded ward, and it would be wonderful if you had all 6 women breastfeeding. I haven't seen it now. It would be great to see those numbers. But she probably would. If she heard she was going into every woman breastfeed, she'd be like, oh, that's going to be really hard to manage.
Yeah, and these are midwives who really they are completely supportive of breastfeeding and want to help, but it's your hands are tied. If it's busy and they're short staffed, you have to prioritize it, or it'll be prioritized for you. And unfortunately, that breastfeed mum sometimes, if it's busy, just gets kind of bumped down. I think it is helpful I know I don't want to frighten anyone that's watching this, but I think it's helpful to understand, sometimes, it's out of the staff's control how much time they get to spend with the mums. I always think though, why aren't we bringing in the Leche League, leaders and Quidju people to support?
Some hospitals do. Like I know in Letterkenny, one of my colleagues is a Leche League leader in Donegal for years, and she goes in it could be twice a week maybe, or maybe once a week, one week and twice. I can't remember. But she's in fairly frequently and they love to see her, and she goes and visits every mum who's breastfeeding, and she sits, and I think it's the time, and research even shows that too, it's the time that you spend with them, not so much as the actual techniques and instruction you're giving them. It's the time you spend to listen and work through things and let the mother maybe work through what she's thinking through herself about her and her baby and the relationship. But that's a huge amount of time for that leader to give up every week to go in, and they can't all be doing it in all hospitals around the country. They love to see her coming because they know she's going to really help the mothers, but that's dependent on like we should be able
I always think it's a great idea, and I think there's plenty of volunteers who would love to come in and offer their help. But we shouldn't need volunteers if the powers that be valued breastfeeding and valued mothering, they would figure out a way to actually provide paid support and more midwives that are on postnatal. They're kind of, staff is really caught between a rock and a hard place. But for parents, who are watching this and maybe due a baby soon, I always say be the squeaky wheel. Don't be afraid to ring the bell, because as women, and I don't want to stereotype everybody, but we don't want to draw attention towards that. We don't want to be the difficult patient, and you're probably sitting there thinking, oh, I'm the only one who can't latch the baby on, and I'm like, this is a learning experience for you and for your baby as well, so don't feel bad for, I always like, ringing the bell and keep ringing it until you get it.
It isn't straightforward for everybody. Like, we're making it sound like it's great. Use this position and your baby will latch on and it'll all be wonderful. And it doesn't go that way for an awful lot of women for so many different reasons. And maybe from a difficult birth or, instrumental birth, it can be difficult for baby to find that time. But in that position, while you're working through whatever you have to do, you could be expressing colostrum and giving that, or whatever you're doing to get over that period of time. Having baby in that position, especially if they're skin to skin, it allows them to reset, and they can figure out where they are, and when they're ready and they're able to latch on, it will hopefully go much better then. So it's a tool. I'm not gonna, like, I did speak somewhere and a lactation consultant stood up afterwards and she said, oh, you're making it sound great, but that's not reality. We have all, and I know I'm
it's not a panacea.
It's not. There are difficulties, and you do have to do sort of all sorts of other things. But the aim is to get there. So you're focusing on, okay, maybe I have to, you know, use a supplement for now, or maybe something's going on at this point. But when I'm home then, or before I leave, before I'm discharged, hopefully we'll be doing it. We'll be trying laid back breastfeeding. I'll see if it works. And babies just, especially, it helps all sorts of things. If there's even a tongue tie, I'm not going to say a very severe one because I'm not an expert on tongue tie or anything, but even slight ones, that's a much better position for them to be in, because again, they're not fighting against gravity. Their tongue is sort of hanging forward and they can get a much deeper latch and feed much better. So there's all sorts of little things. Another one of the reasons that some of the midwives and students said they couldn't use it was mother's anatomy. So they said,
I was just about to ask you this. Because I've had some discussions with, now I'm in the US now with speaking to obstetric nurses, because mostly obstetric nurses, not midwives in the hospitals. They're like, I've tried this. It doesn't work for women who have, you know, bigger breasts, and that's the resistance. But when I've looked at, you know, Nancy Moorbacher's, you know, her videos and the starter positions, it looks very clear that it actually works really well with moms with a bigger breast. Yeah.
Again, it was, and you can watch her videos, they're fantastic. And what she did there, and what you can do yourself, or, you know, if you're working with mothers, is to tweak it. Don't just sit there and try it and say, oh, it's just not working now. That mother in that video, she, a high BMI, she got a lot lower down because her breasts were a good bit bigger. And so she had to go a good bit more back in order for her breasts to be in the position. Mothers' breasts go all sorts of directions. I've had mothers whose nipples go this way. You know, you have to work with what you have, and maybe a rolled up tea towel or whatever kind of cloth you have, just to stick it under there and or bring it forward. Another misconception was that you just let the baby lie there and you do nothing. And the baby just will magically latch on and that's it. And that's not laid back breastfeeding either. You know, it is, just imagine if you had nobody and you were in the wilderness somewhere and gave birth to this baby, what would you do? Of course, you'd assist them and help them and get them in position. So, you know, you can sort of use your arm as a guardrail and bring them in, and you can maneuver your breast a little bit. Quite often, what we'll do is do what Nancy again calls as a breast sandwich. So we'll just shape the breast a little bit, make it a little bit more pointed, if you like, for the baby to get a good latch, and then hopefully that'll continue from there. And again, as you were saying something about the early weeks, you know, you were saying mothers are saying, can I never use these upright positions? No, of course you can, but this is perfect for the first few weeks, because after that, baby will get more head control, they'll be better able to latch onto that nipple, all these things will fall into place. You won't be sitting there holding the breast every single time. You know, those things will work themselves out. So it's just in the beginning to get things off to a good start. Yeah.
And it's another, what I find it great for is if someone has a really fast letdown and baby is spluttering and choking, and it's just not a good experience for anybody, you know, but sometimes that laid back as well can really help that, you know, so baby's not getting
it's I know it's an American sound and phrase, but we have it in one of our books in the Leche League, and they call it the fire hose effect. So if you've got a really powerful letdown, like some mums will say, baby will just latch off at that moment and it'll hit their toes. Like it can be a really powerful spray. So you can imagine lying back, gravity is not going to be letting it flow out like a fire hose. And it works. It can work. There's so many things, like it really helps. It works so well. Yeah.
So Margaret, tell me, for let's just say we've got a first time mom watching today, and she's due in a month. What advice would you give her around getting breastfeeding off to a good start, and hopefully not a painful start, and for everything to just go a little bit smoother? What advice would you give her?
Yeah. Just some really simple stuff would be, I'd explain in very simple terms. I wouldn't go into the detail we've gone into here today at all, but I'd just say, when you go to breastfeed, think of it from your baby's point of view, and let your body secure your baby. You let gravity secure your baby to your body, you know, instead of sitting bolt upright and maybe baby you leaning over, getting sore shoulders and a sore neck, and baby trying to hold himself or herself up. Just relax back and let baby on. Do skin to skin. If it's not working, ask for help. Don't be thinking, oh, it's only me and I can't breastfeed for whatever reason. And definitely before baby's born, get in touch with your local support group, whether it's the Leche League or there's Quidju here in Ireland, and there's other organizations out there, because it really helps at that stage when you haven't got the baby that you're trying to latch on, to listen to other women's stories about what they went through. And you can gather up all the information you can get online links, you can get leaflets, you can ask 20 questions. As leaders at meetings, we love to see the mother coming in with her page of 20 questions. It does the meeting for us. She can just keep asking, and everyone can sort of offer the correct information or maybe tell stories about what they did. So, you know, you hear people say if they know absolutely nothing about birth and breastfeeding and babies, they'll say, why would you go to a meeting, or why would you need a book, or, you know, we have the
Because
womanly
it's
art of
natural.
breastfeeding. Yeah, it's natural. You should be able to do it. Why, you know, and yet then when it happens, oh, now you've got all these questions that you need answered yesterday. So that's the time to go and find out the answers to all your questions. Or even you don't know what you don't know. So just go and listen to stories of other women and how they started out breastfeeding or how they overcame a difficulty. And, you know, then you'll be more knowledgeable on all these things. So
that's one thing I always recommend is to mums, go along to a meeting while you're pregnant. People will not think you're weird, you know, and you'll be so welcome there, because for a lot of women have never seen, like, up close and personal what that latch looks like, you know, and the different positions. It's all very well looking at in a book, but to have somebody, you know, your people from in your community saying, oh, I tried this and this worked better for me, and just there's such a wealth of knowledge there. And I think it's for anyone to get along to a couple of meetings. And I think as well, because you build up that bit of community with that group. So when you've had your baby and you're, you know, trying to get out to that first meeting and you're late and you're panicked, you know, you walk in the door and it's not like a first date or anything, you know, people there, and they've all been in your shoes and are there to support you. So I would.
And they're excited to see you because they only remember you when you were pregnant and they haven't met your baby. And no, it can be great. And like with COVID, we had to go all online. And so a lot of meetings have stayed online. You know, we still have most of our in-person meetings back, but if you can't get out to a meeting, at least, you know, you can link in. Anyone from around the world could link into the Leche League of Ireland online meetings. There are plenty of them. So if you just reach out, and they're free, like there's none of this that's going to cost you anything, whether going in person to a meeting or linking into a Zoom meeting. And it really can make a huge difference to mothers.
And but they'll never refuse a packet of biscuits or throw it into
There's
your
always
bag.
something nice, a cake and a cup of tea at the end of it.
And a cup of tea makes everything better, doesn't it? Margaret, do you have anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up today? I really appreciate your time this evening.
I don't think so. My research, Patricia Larkin and myself, this paper is submitted for publication, and it's still in the process. So if you want to look me up, maybe you can put some of the details, my email or Twitter or whatever. If anybody has any more questions, there's loads more I didn't say, but sure, we only hit the tip of the iceberg. But I think I think we said enough for new mothers to get started and at least know what laid back breastfeeding is and to give it a go and ask about it, you know, when you're in hospital, because hopefully at this stage, research takes on average 17 years from it's published until it actually makes it into practice, which is a shocking amount of time. But it's very hard for people to change practice and guidelines to change and things like that. So all of this was first published in 2008. So we're 15 years on. So we're very close to being on target. And the two main textbooks in, say, the UK and Ireland for midwives, the last edition of Miles' textbooks for midwifery actually has laid back breastfeeding in. So it is coming. We're just nearly there, and we have to keep on keep an eye on.
Yeah. Well, it's thanks to, you know, people like yourselves who have taken an interest and want to see evidence-based care, because I'm thinking, okay, so it's 17 years. If I'm sitting waiting on this evidence, you know, it could be, if we were starting from today, you're like, your child will be on his way to college before the practice actually become just normalized within the system. But and I hope this has been helpful for not just expectant parents, but for any professionals that are out there that are interested in learning a little bit more. You've probably heard what is laid back, and hopefully that's been helpful. Just again, it is just the tip of the iceberg to share.
You can Google it. Just Google laid back breastfeeding. You'll see images. You'll find out information. Just as long as you have that phrase, you know.
Yeah,
it should help. Yeah.
All right. Thank you again, Margaret, for joining us today. And it's, it was a pleasure. Thank you for joining us and sharing your expertise. I look forward to reading that paper.
Thanks very much for inviting me.